the best, where he's like, yeah, I had a council member in a different city last week who had to have open access in the lobby of the hotel in Georgia, the country, not the state.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone's showing up for that.
Do we need to do attendance? Probably not for the work session.
We sure can.
Okay, let's just do it for
Okay.
Sure.
Councilmember Pasco,
Here.
Councilmember Mock,
Present.
Councilmember Sayer,
Here.
Councilmember Pershman,
Present.
Mayor Johnson.
Present, thanks. All right, I think I mentioned to a few of you, normally we do our work sessions across the hall in the conference room because it's just a little bit more formal, but we have one council member participating remotely from beautiful North Dakota this evening. So that's why we're in here. So let's see, I will imagine that we don't have a city manager's report this evening.
I don't.
Okay, council request. Council, anything from you guys?
No, I don't have anything.
No. Eric, anything from you?
Nothing for me.
The one request that I was going to make and kind of just bring up for discussion, I would like it for us, so I think we're meeting, is it next Monday, for interviews for commissioners. I would like to see the list of questions that we're working on be sent out to all of the candidates in advance of those interviews. I think, I just think that that would be nice to have for our folks who are interviewing.
I'm trying to remember, we discussed this at the last work session, didn't we? And I don't remember where we landed.
No, we discussed what questions we were going to ask.
Yeah.
We didn't discuss if we were going to mail them out ahead of time.
Okay.
We discussed questions when we were interviewing to fill Joy's former council seat.
Okay.
And we had a discussion there that we thought that kind of part of the interview for that should be having to look this up.
Yeah.
But I think given that this is a level that's a little bit not as in line with council, I think it would be a nice to have to send these out for our folks.
I don't have any problem with it.
I don't either.
Same.
Eric, do you have any thoughts? Everybody here is saying, let's do it.
I'm going to ask, are your mics turned on?
Mine
Yes.
is. We'll try to
Okay.
do a better job of leaning in.
Yeah, so if you would, it's a little difficult to hear. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
So I'm not going to weigh in on this one because I didn't hear it all.
Okay. Just to bring you up to speed, the four of us here are in favor of sending out the questions to the candidates for the commissions, those interviews that we're doing.
Oh,
next
in
week.
advance of the interview?
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to be people as well prepared as they can be and think about those questions.
Okay. That's something you can help with. Okay, take care of that. Okay, thanks, Brenda.
I have another question then
Yeah.
pertaining to the meeting next Monday night. I will be out of town now next Monday night. Are these gonna be televised, or I will just be missing this one?
I think we've always had them in the other room.
Okay,
I don't.
From my knowledge, we've never recorded them.
okay, okay, all right, that's all then, thanks.
All right. Okay, up next is the Metropolitan Mosquito Control District presentation. Alex Carlson. Alex, we tried to look and see what would be the coldest day where people would be thinking the least amount about mosquitoes, and we decided it would be February 18th. So come on up. You could just sit.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. And then are my slides?
I believe so, yep.
Okay. And Commissioner Fahey's here too. I don't know if you
Yep.
want to do any sort of introduction or
He needs no
welcome.
introduction.
He needs no introduction. Well, thank you, Mayor Johnson and council members. My name is Alex Carlson. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the Metropolitan Mosquito Control District. And with me, I've got Casey Herman, who is the manager of the Jordan facility, which serves the Carver area, and Matt Geeson, who is a field supervisor whose area includes Carver. And then, of course, Commissioner Fahey. So thank you for having us here tonight. We're excited for the opportunity. Do I just say go when it's time to switch to the slides?
To pull on your left earlobe.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I'll just do a finger guns. There we go. So just a little background on MMCD. So we've been around since 1958, and our governance is the county commissioners. So we serve the 7 counties in the metro area, over 2,900 square miles, over 3 million people. We have over 80,000 wetland habitats, and you'll see why that's important to mosquitoes in a moment. 30,000 woodland habitats, and our funding comes from property taxes. So we're considered a special district. So our funding comes from any resident who lives in the area. The median home pays about $10.87 per year for mosquito control services, which we think is a pretty good deal because that covers comprehensive mosquito control, mosquito-borne disease suppression, tick-borne disease surveillance, We do a lot of public education just because we can't be everywhere all the time, so it's good for people to know what they can do to help with mosquito suppression. And then we also do some black fly or biting gnat control, which is a big part of anything along the rivers and streams, which affects this area significantly. And next. So it's just good to start with a little background about mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, they develop in standing water, so in order for mosquitoes to thrive, they need a lot of stagnant water, which we have a lot of here in Minnesota. And so it tends to be those more shallow stagnant water areas, so not the large bodies of water like big ponds and lakes. It's shallow marshes, swamps, shallow ponds, and things like that. There's over 3,000 species in the world, and we have about 52 here in Minnesota. And of those, only about half bother with people at all. So most of the species that we have exclusively feed on non-mammals like frogs or birds or other animals, but we have species that do specifically target mammals, and so those are the ones that we are concerned with. We follow the rain each summer, and a big thing that we look for is those 1-inch rainfalls or more, and that's what triggers what we call a brood of mosquitoes. So every time we see about an inch of rainfall, we see another brood. And we know that about a week after that rainfall is when those mosquito populations are going to surge, because that's how long it takes for them to go through their life cycle in the water. You can see that picture there. The larva stage is really what we're focused on when it comes to treatment. Most of our treatment is to target them in the larval stage, and I'll explain why based on the materials that we use. So when we talk about mosquito habitat, we mean water, permanent water sources, flood waters, any areas that's designed to flood up after it rains and keep the water away from residences and buildings becomes mosquito habitat. And then man-made containers and man-made habitat for mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, anything that holds water can become mosquito habitat. So it's a good reminder for people to check their yard for buckets, for clogged gutters, for loose tarps, or anything that can hold water. And a big part of our program is just educating people to remind them that that's where the mosquitoes are coming from. So get rid of that water to help us out. And environmental stewardship is a very important part of our program. It's called integrated pest management, what we practice, the idea that we want to make sure that we're targeting the specific species of mosquitoes with minimal impact to anything else in the environment. Obviously, human health we don't want to have any impacts on, but then we also want to protect pollinators. We want to make sure that we're not harming fish or any other aquatic animals. And so we use very specific products that are targeted for mosquito larvae and leave everything else. And our program is reviewed every year by a technical advisory board, or TAB. It's basically a panel of scientists that reviews our program. They actually just met last week. They go through all of our operations. They recommend studies. They recommend reports and things like that, just to make sure that we're being as effective and efficient and safe as possible. And it all starts with good surveillance. So when you see our MMCD trucks, a lot of times what we're doing is wetland surveillance. We're using our favorite tool, the long-handled dipper, which you can see in that video. It's basically a cup at the end of a long stick. Our staff will walk into the field, skim along the surface of the water where the larva tends to congregate, and then try to get a count for how many larvae is in a given pond at a given time. Those samples are then taken back to our entomology lab to be analyzed. We also do adult collections where we have traps that we set up. So there's an example of a CO2 trap. It gives out a small amount of CO2 through some dry ice, and there's a fan attached to it. The mosquitoes are attracted to the CO2, and then the fan sucks them into that little net, and then we can count how many adult mosquitoes. We also do human-baited mosquito surveillance, where we get to staff get to volunteer to stand outside right at sundown in the summertime and wait for the mosquitoes to come to us with a net.
Terrible.
Awful.
Do you get hazard pay or something?
Oh yeah, of course.
Do people really volunteer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it could be a little bit of both. It depends on where you live, because we want to make sure it's spread out. But yeah, we have a little net, and we catch the mosquitoes for about 2 minutes, and then we bring those back to the lab. Actually, I did bring some show and tell, so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. But when we collect the larvae in the wetlands, we put them in these little vials with a label so we know exactly where they came from. So let's see what those look like.
Oh, wow.
And you can go ahead to the next slide. So those samples in those vials are brought back to our entomology lab, where we have several full-time entomologists who work year-round, and then we have a seasonal staff of college students or taxonomists that come in and they do the identification. So what they're looking for with those larval samples is it a species that will impact humans? And so if it's not something that we're going to do any treatments for. And then we specifically want to target the disease vectors, so the mosquitoes that are capable of carrying certain mosquito-borne illnesses. So those are our main focus. But then we also can bring those adult samples back and see if they're a disease vector, and we can actually test them on site in St. Paul to see if they're carrying West Nile virus. So we usually can be pretty proactive if there's disease outbreaks. We can act on those quickly before they really affect people. And this just kind of demonstrates our control. A lot of people know us because of our helicopters. They hear our helicopters or they see them flying over swamps and marshes in the summertime. The table there shows just kind of how we focus our program. Really, it's been larval control primarily, and then especially the past couple of years. You can kind of see the story of 2021 through 2023. Those were drought years where not a lot of rain fell in the summer. And then 2024 was a very wet year with a lot of rain. And so you could see the significant change in acres of larval control there. But the reason we focus on larval control is the materials that we use, more show and tell, are specifically targeted to impact mosquito larvae. So mosquito larvae have an alkaline gut, and so the bacteria strain only reacts with other animals that have alkaline gut, which is basically exclusively mosquito larvae and black fly larvae. So when they eat the bacteria that's on this corn granule, it crystallizes their digestive system and stops them from being able to develop to adult mosquitoes. So it's very safe and effective. People can handle it. Our staff are safe around it, and it doesn't affect other insects, which is why we use this product more than anything. We use a couple different formulations as well. Some last longer than others, but the mode of actions are very similar. And just here's some examples. So BTI is the name of the most common ingredient that we use. It's BTI mosquito control if people want to do any research on their own about it. But usually when you see our helicopters flying out, they're dropping this. We also use similar products like methoprene or spinosad, a little bit longer lasting, similar results, slightly different modes of action. But we like to alternate products a little bit depending on the site and depending on just to make sure we're reducing the chance of insecticide resistance. Mosquito-borne diseases. So when we're talking about mosquito-borne disease, we're talking about West Nile virus is the most common one. There's usually anywhere from a few dozen to over 100 cases in Minnesota in a given year. Mainly affects older adults. Whereas lacrosse encephalitis is a disease that tends to affect younger children. That's one spread by tree hole mosquitoes. Jamestown Canyon virus is spread by spring mosquitoes. Triple E or Eastern equine encephalitis is very rare, but it's a very deadly mosquito-borne disease. We have never had a human case in Minnesota, but there have been horse cases, so we try to be proactive. Dog heartworm, it's just a good reminder that your pets are susceptible as well, so make sure that they're getting the treatments and everything so that they're not getting sickened by mosquitoes. So looking back at last year, the big story of last year was it was a very wet year, but it didn't correlate to as high of mosquito numbers as we would normally expect. If you look at the graph there, that's the green line was last year and the gray line is the 10-year average. So for most of the year, we were below average. And a big reason for this was our two nuisance mosquitoes that we most commonly see, the vexans and the perturbans, because they vex and they perturb us. They were really impacted by the previous 3 years of drought. They were really knocked down. Those numbers started at such a low base that it took a while, even though with lots of rain, it took a while for them to really rebound. By the end of the season, they did. So if we see another rainy year this year, we might see a lot more of them. The other big story from last year was the winter that wasn't. If you remember last year, by this time last year, we'd already found our first deer tick. And just a couple days from now, we would have found our first mosquito larva in the water, which is very early, very early. Usually we don't find our first larva till April, first week or two in April. And deer ticks usually aren't out till it's warm enough that there's no snow on the ground. So last year was a very early year, but it didn't end up with as many overall mosquitoes as we would have expected. And this is district-wide. I'll have Carver specific numbers in a little bit. There were fewer cases of West Nile virus last year. So most mosquito-borne diseases are transmitted by mosquitoes that like man-made habitat or they thrive in hot, dry conditions. So the benefit of a cooler, wetter year is even though there are a lot more mosquitoes overall, the more dangerous disease vectors weren't as abundant. And then the spring flooding that we saw in the Minnesota River and throughout the district last year caused a big surge in black flies in the early spring, but those numbers went down quickly and remained tolerable the rest of the summer. So here's for Carver. So you can see I brought 2023 in so you can compare back to back. So significant more sites inspected, but the acres treated was where you saw a really big jump from 36 in 2023 to 278 last year. Adult mosquito control stayed about the same. Our main reason for adult mosquito control is in response to concerns about diseases, or if cities or communities reach out and say we're having a big event, we want to make sure that mosquitoes aren't going to be eating people alive during. We do tire recycling, so we had about similar number of tires as 2023, 72 last year. We did a fewer catch basin treatments, but a big one from last year was the resident calls, and even 234 is a big number, but 488 was significant. I think I did some just number crunching, just looked at the number of households in just the city of Carver and the number of people called. I think it's almost like 1 out of 8 households called. The most common call we get is just what we call a mosquito annoyance report. So people calling just to say, mosquitoes are really bad, here's my address, anything you can do to help. And so we pinpoint those in our maps to help with our treatment decisions. But last year we definitely heard from the people of Carver. And we encourage people to call. We like hearing from people. You can go ahead. So this is just kind of a snapshot of that. So this map depicts all the yellow triangles are all the call locations that came in during 2024. And this is actually I pinpointed 1 week because there was really 1 week of mosquito abundance, which you may all remember. It was the week of May 27th through June 2nd. So the little red dot you can see there that says 6,448, that was 1 CO2 trap, and that was the number of mosquitoes that were collected at that single trap in 1 evening. So that was really the peak week of mosquitoes, and it correlated with the number of calls that were coming in. So we received, that 1 week alone, we had 273 calls from Carver and 58 from Chaska. And the big reason for that was the flooding of the river bottoms. So when the river bottoms flood, in the spring 80s mosquitoes, which is a spring species, they all emerge and they come out of the water, and they come out as adults in early June or late May. And that's really what's responsible for that big surge early in the year. One struggle that we're always coming up against is we are a district. We serve the 7 counties, but we're outranked by state and federal organizations. So the river bottoms are part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They manage those lands. And then there's other areas in the river bottoms that are managed by the DNR. So we have to get, we're essentially prohibited from doing surveillance and treatments in some of those areas because they're not our land and we don't have permission. We are working on building those relationships and improving our access. So we actually have a meeting with DNR tomorrow to talk about this specifically because we want to make sure that we're being as helpful as we can when it comes to this.
Do you have a buffer? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do
Yeah.
you have a buffer with those agencies of how close you can be to their waterways?
Of wherever they designate the start of their land is, and I'm sure, I don't know if Casey could speak more specifically to that because he does a lot with our permitting with DNR, but.
So when it comes to the adult control.
Do you mind coming up, just because we've got
Yeah.
a member who's participating
sorry.
remotely? Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to like the DNR property, we can't spray adult control on any other property. So our buffer, we keep buffers from their property anyways because we just can't treat it. The wetlands on there, we don't inspect or treat. It's kind of just, they like to keep their land pristine and not alter stuff that's in the water. And so when it comes to specific buffers for their land, we just don't touch it.
Sure, but I'm
It's
talking about
kinda-
like, do you have so many feet, whatever, that you try to
No.
stay away so you don't have overspray or over?
No, we'll go right up to the borders of it.
Okay.
Yep. And there is, for the adult control, it's like 300 feet from restricted property is kind of what our threshold is. So we do try staying away. And it's not, it could be for other reasons, it's restricted. But we do have spots that are in place that we won't treat up to a certain point if we know that location.
I'm just
But-
asking because we are down the river bottoms here.
Yeah.
And so the homes that are right down here, often, I live down here, we have an abundance of mosquitoes. But U.S. Fish and Wildlife is not far from
Right.
back doors of many people's homes. So are you able to spray those areas down here? Or do you stay that 300?
Yeah, if it's their property, we're not doing private properties. If we're spraying, we're gonna do public parks.
Yep.
And someone could call a private contractor and they could have, it's weird, it's private contractors can spray it.
Right.
Like they're allowed to, I guess. And their buffers aren't what we have.
Sure. We have trails
So-
and stuff that are behind there, so I think I've seen mosquito control on some of those spots. So I was just curious about
Yeah.
more spray. I want more spray than less, so I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I just didn't know if there was something by law that, or by practice that you.
Yeah, and I think we're really careful with the
Boundaries.
fog trucks too, because with a backpack treatment, it's real specific and we can control exactly where that's going. With the fog trucks, you're kind of at the mercy of the wind. And so we really have to be mindful of open bodies of water, where that stuff's gonna drift. So that's a lot more sensitive when we take a fog truck out. It's just, you don't have as much control over that material.
Okay. All right.
So,
Thank you.
You can stay up here if you want.
sure.
I just found this really interesting because I've been at mosquito control for a little over 5 years now, and the past year for sure, and the past couple of years, all of a sudden, I've noticed a lot more calls from this part of town. So I was, with the help of one of our data scientists, and found from 2022, basically the same time of year when those mosquitoes peaked at this trap, the first week in June or second week in June. We only saw 3 calls from Carver and 5 from Chaska. So it just shows that the mosquitoes are bad this time of year, but there's a lot more awareness of who we are now, which I think that's a good thing. And we want people to be aware of who we are and what we can do and to call us when these issues come up. So I appreciate our cooperation and coordination with the city. I know you've posted stuff on Facebook and things like that just to get the word out to residents about who we are. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting snapshot. So looking ahead to this year, it's hard to predict the precipitation this far out. What if it's going to be a wet year or a dry year? There's one species that we can predict with some accuracy. It's a cattail mosquito, which I mentioned earlier. They're actually a species that hatches in the fall, so they're in the water right now, and when the snow melts and the ice unfreezes, they'll come out of the water right around the end of June, early July. Usually peak around the 4th of July. They've been low the past couple of years because of the drought, and they were low last year, but because of last year's rain, we're predicting they're going to surge a lot this year. So past couple of years, we haven't seen that mid-July surge that we're accustomed to, but it might be back this year. We're going to do everything that we can to treat some of those acres where they're breeding, but I know just looking at the number of acres we found breeding in the fall, it was the highest it's been in 10 years. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I know. It's the good and bad side of drought. I mean, when it's very dry, gardeners and farmers aren't happy, but mosquito control is, and people who are worried about mosquito is, and then vice versa. When it's very wet, everybody's flowers and gardens look great, but there's a lot of mosquitoes around. Internally, we're looking for expanding our drone program. So we're trying to get some information out to residents that they're likely going to be seeing drones this year, because it's a new part of our program that's now at every one of our facilities. These are really cool ways to kind of treat those small to medium-sized wetlands, where before people had to put on the chest waders and go into the water with a backpack. Took a lot of time, wasn't the safest. We weren't getting even distribution. This allows us to get in quickly, get even distribution, because you can draw out the borders of the wetland, and then it's just a lot more safe for our staff as well. So it's an exciting part of our program that we hope to continue to expand. There's a new tire recycling procedure this year. So I mentioned tire recycling. So one of the things that we do for people is we do offer free tire recycling for residents of the district. Last year, because it was so wet, we fell way behind in our tire pickups, and tires were sitting around, and so we weren't able to get to them just because we had to focus on treating the helicopter acres. And so this year we're changing our procedure, and so people will actually be given the opportunity to bring their tires to us instead of waiting for us to come get them. So we're going to have designated drop-off days either at our Jordan facility or at the nearby fairgrounds, where people can bring their tires and get them recycled. So more details about that will be coming, but that's just kind of a way we're shifting the way that we do that this year. And then we're working with DNR and other state agencies to expand our service area, and we're unveiling our new strategic plan this spring, working with a local agency to really continue to expand our operations with the resources that we have. Just some resources from residents I like to share. Our website is a really cool tool. You can get notifications about helicopters. You can get notifications about work that we're doing. You can send in requests or tips or anything like that about mosquito issues. And we have a residence guide so people can learn about how to control mosquitoes in their own yard.
Alex, what would that say if it didn't say helicopters are not active today? Would it say, like, we're in Maple Grove?
It says helicopters are active today, and then when you click it, it says what cities that we're in.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so we have a helicopter page that's updated every day. And then, yeah, you can just, right on our homepage, it'll show if they're active. The maps that I mentioned, here's just a snapshot of one. So we have over 80,000 wetlands mapped, so people can go to our website, pull up any address, click on an outlined area, and then get details, I think about 20 years of history about what's been done at that site. So you can see what mosquitoes were found, when dips were done and to find mosquitoes, what treatments were done. And a lot of times people are surprised. They're like, oh, that big pond I thought was where the mosquitoes are coming from, but it was actually the ditch on the side of the road. And that's where they're coming from. And a lot of times we're working during the day when people are at work, so they may not realize their pond was treated, just a couple days ago. So it's just kind of a cool tool for people to explore. People can sign up for email alerts if they want to know when we're doing adult treatments. Also, we usually send out emails when we're starting helicopter treatments in a certain area. So people can get those notifications quickly. And public outreach. Earlier I said that we were at the Carver, on one of the slides that we're at the Carver County Fair. But if there's any other, big public events that I think would be beneficial to have, that's our mosquito mascot. Her name is Victoria, so she makes appearances at public events. But our reason for public outreach is because we can't be everywhere, so it's good for people to know what they can do. Also for recruitment, we hire about 200 people every single year, so it's good for people to know what the summer jobs are. And then just general awareness. We want people to know when they see those helicopters, it's us, we're dropping this, and answer all of their questions. And with that, I will open it up to any further questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it might not align with your goals, but Carver's annual festival is Steamboat Days, and it's always the weekend after Labor Day. So
Okay.
not prime mosquito season, but maybe prime hiring season if
Yeah.
you're trying to get folks to look forward to the next summer.
Sure. It's also a very active tick season in the fall, so it's good to remind people that they're still out.
It must be a lot of fun at parties.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is awesome. What I think I kind of hear you saying is when you went through those maps of like 2022 versus 2024, is that our messaging to tell folks like, don't call the city with mosquito issues, here's the website, like report it, and then they will address it, that's working?
Yeah, it does seem to be, yes.
Okay, great. I don't know that I have any other questions. What do you guys, questions? Lori?
I have an idea that just for us to think about, and it's probably bad timing, but maybe next year. So middle of May, I think it's May 17th this year, we do Carver cleanup days. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something with tire drop off.
Oh, to go and coincide with that?
Yeah. You mentioned Jordan was a location, so we do annual, which one of the most popular days of the year.
Christmas in reverse. It's Christmas in reverse.
Christmas, yeah. But yeah, so just something, as your presentation was going, that popped in my mind as an idea. So I think it's something that we'll maybe discuss offline or discuss in a future meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Sayer. That's actually something we're trying to reach out to cities too, because a lot of cities are already doing cleanup days and some are already collecting tires. So we can come partner with you to take the tires up to a certain amount. So if you're already collecting them, we can help with the recycling of that as well. And it just really helps. Our biggest struggle with tires is staff time. It's not so much just the cost of recycling the tires, it's having the time for people to go out and collect them and bring them to the recycling facility. So if cities can partner with us and help take care, we can help with the costs.
Yeah, so it's a note I made, and
Yeah.
we'll see what we might be able to do.
Great.
Any other questions, comments? Nope. Eric, anything from you?
So when you said, you gave us the count of how many calls came in with concerns about mosquitoes, are you reactive to that? Does that drive your treatment schedule? How do you take those calls into your decision-making process there?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Pershman. Yes, it's one more data point that we have. Like I said, we have our trap networks out and we have sweep collections, but a lot of times the calls are coming from areas where we don't necessarily have traps out and we don't necessarily have people doing the mosquito sweeps. And so that's just another data point for us to be like, we might need to go investigate that area to see why so many people are calling. And we try to, so it absolutely does help us determine our control decisions.
Do you have any remote monitoring technology, so where you've got a sensor sophisticated enough in the field that it gives you data without sending somebody to check it?
It's a very good question, and the answer is not yet. but hopefully soon. We actually just tested last year a trap that has like Wi-Fi capability that it can sense whether what's collecting is a mosquito or another bug, and then transmit when it collects those. It's not sophisticated enough yet to tell what species of mosquitoes, but something we just tested out last year to see how it works, and those would run all the time, and we would just have to go replace the battery. So it's potential. It might be the future of mosquito control.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I
It
know
was
with
informative, thank you.
those traps too, it's kind of cool because they can get it down to species based off of the wing beats. So when you hear the buzzing of the mosquito, certain species have maybe a faster pitch, or it's just a sound they put off, and so that's what but there's over 3,000 in the world, different species, so they're trying to fine tune all that.
Very
But-
cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So I joked when you came in that we invited you here on the coldest day of the year.
Yeah.
Is there any benefit to the cold that we're having right now? You talked a lot of predictions, so it's
Yeah.
already out there percolating.
That's a great question. Actually, the benefit is there's a lot of non-native species that come up to Minnesota every summer. And one we saw last year, we saw our highest collections ever of Lone Star ticks, which are the rare tick species that can cause the red meat allergy, which you may have seen on the news. So this cold weather is bad for them. So they can't really thrive in cold weather. So when it's cold, especially when there's not a lot of snow cover, that's probably going to take out a lot of the Lone Star ticks that maybe would have reemerged this year. And then any other exotics, something like that, their eggs won't overwinter when it gets cold like this.
And I think there's also the West Nile mosquitoes that are resting in like barns or whatever overwintering. And so when it gets to the extreme colds, it might be enough to kill those off that might not have, and they would survive and start that cycle up with West Nile again next year.
Okay,
So
good to know, some benefit to the cold.
Yes.
Right? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for
Thank
coming
you.
out. We will continue to tell folks to call you, so I have a feeling that you will be out in Carver quite often. It just seems like between the river and everything else.
And if you do email them, you get an email response back. I did. I emailed. Somebody emailed me right back. It was within less than 24 hours I heard from someone. So it works.
Yep.
Not us. Right, not us. Email them, not us.
and thank you for putting it on your website. I did see that there was a tab that you can click on that says mosquito control right on there.
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how we can best engage with folks and get these kinds of messages out. And we have the newsletter that comes with your utility bill. We have all of our Facebook, the website, all those kinds of things. But always trying to figure out better ways of streamlining processes and reaching more folks.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Stay
You
warm.
too.
All right. Moving on. Item number.
No, that's for you.
Please take that
As
away.
much as I love science, my children don't need that particular.
All right. Item number 5, the Minnesota River Congress. Mr. Sparlin, come on up. All right, Council, just to give you guys a reminder, this was the water storage initiative that Scott reached out to us to sign a letter of support for. But I think collectively, and Scott, I've learned one thing is that I try not to speak for the group, but I think collectively we're kind of struggling on what is this, what does this mean, and what do you need from us? So,
You know, this is so simple and so painless that I hope once you hear what we're looking for, first of all, you're in good company. I did send all of, and hopefully you all got the documents and you had a chance to look at those. We have an endorsement letter, we have a resolution that would be a council motion to do that. As I said, as stated, good company, Henderson, Granite Falls, Eden Prairie, Arlington, Amboy, New Ulm, Mankato, Olivia, Nicollet, Redwood Falls, Springfield, St. Peter, Winthrop, Le Sueur, Sleepy Eye, and Hennepin County have all endorsed this initiative. And that's all you're doing. You're not endorsing our organization.
Yep.
You're not endorsing any single person. You're just behind us being on the Minnesota River, and that being all that it is and what water storage is all about is a good thing. And you should go forth and try to find more funding and ways that we can increase water storage on our landscape in 2/5 of the state of Minnesota. So there you have it. It's pretty simplistic. I've got it in right in there is all you're being asked to do. That's it.
So Scott, just taking half a step back, you said supporting of your initiative, which is finding areas for water storage on,
Not areas,
okay,
okay? Those are not our bailiwick.
Sure.
That is up to the Board of Water and Soil Resources, that they are the implementers of that, along with all of our SWCDs and watershed districts and those people that do that. What we're about is trying to get more resources from the state of Minnesota, from our federal partners, from private foundations and so on, to support the program, to grow the program, to get the program so it can be brought to scale for the state. Because right now we don't, we have succeeded in raising $40 million at this point. And it's a good start, but that is.
Mayor Johnson, could I ask,
yes.
Can we start from step one here? I think for myself, I'm having a hard time just getting a grasp of what this means. Can you start at step one of what the water storage is, what the initiative is, what your goal is? I'd really like to hear the explanations of this from you about this entire program as a whole. Yes, we have the documents here, but I think it'd be really helpful, as Mayor Johnson said, to start from kind of step one, not the paperwork that's in front of us. Talk to us about this program. Talk to us about what you want to do. I know it says water storage and we're talking about erosion and these kind of things, but start from the beginning.
Okay, once again, really only asking for one thing, and that is what's in this highlighted area.
I don't feel.
You know what I'm saying?
That's fantastic, but
Yeah.
I need to have the background information in order to support that. So can you talk a little bit about the background of this program?
Okay, well, I did send out the, this is the water storage program, and it's explained right here in the documents. Okay.
Sir, I appreciate that it is
Yeah.
explained in the documents. I would like to hear from your perspective why this is an important program
Okay,
and what
okay,
you're looking for.
okay. Well, it's not just me. It's,
It's all the cities that are listed.
Yes,
You had
and-
to get them somehow.
And not only that, along with all of the other organizations as well. If you look at that list, okay, they've all endorsed trying to get water storage, okay?
Scott, I think what we're just trying to come, like taking the other cities aside, and I don't know, I still am not clear on what we're talking about. You said.
Okay, well, water storage is needed on the landscape.
Sure.
We've come to this point to realize that if we don't store some water on our landscape, we're gonna have continued flooded, degraded situations.
Yep.
The Minnesota River is gonna continue to move tons and tons of sediment downstream to Lake Pepin, ultimately the Gulf of Mexico, and I can go through a long litany.
Yep.
And I think the state of Minnesota has already recognized that this is a really important part of the health of our river and our river towns and our river system.
So what's the practical application of that? We support this.
Yep.
You go ahead and you're talking to folks in St. Paul about
Correct.
this. and
Yes.
You said it's not purchasing land for water storage, but where are we?
Well,
storing?
yes, we don't do that.
Okay, tell
Okay.
me what we do.
We are there trying to advocate for more money
Yep.
for the program.
Okay,
That's it. All of the other players and the people are in place.
and the program is a state program?
Yes,
Okay,
it's called it's the water, it's right here.
So I'm going to ask a question too, and
Sure.
I think we all are trying to get to a point of understanding, and maybe we've just missed something really simple. But what is Carver's acknowledgement or sign on to this agreement do? How does that committing to anything? But tell us how our acknowledgement of this moves the process forward more. Since we're not getting a land or money.
Is Carver, would you consider Carver to be a river-sensitive community? Are you connected culturally to the river And do you occasionally wonder if a lot of water's gonna come down from the upper part of the basin and inundate your city?
I don't think anyone's gonna have any argument about the, what concerns about water conservation and storage and that. I think we're concerned about is being a signatory on something where we're not quite sure what that commits Carver to, what that looks like. Does that mean,
It doesn't.
well, you were a signer in 2025, and because of that, we'd like to put a great big water tank on somewhere in Carver in 2030. I think we're just trying to
Yeah.
due diligence, understand what signing on means for the city of Carver, other than a general agreement that, yes, we should take steps to deal with water drainage in an appropriate way, and, do green plantings to capture more runoff, and those kind of things I think we all agree we should do. The difference is you're asking us to sign something, and we're not really sure what that is. And I apologize if I misheard the same question from council, but I think I've missed the very basic of why you need the signature and what that commits Carver to.
When we go to talk to legislators at the Capitol, and we hand them this list that says, these people think that this is important, that we start to store water on our rural landscape at a scale that will affect the Minnesota River to the point it will enable the river to act more naturally, to have less sediment, and all of the good things that come from water storage, which has been identified as a major focus for going forward to help us deal with climate change and land use in the future. Okay? So all you're doing by signing on is saying that we recognize that, and your signature is going to be used along with this list of other signatories when I go and talk to legislators at the Capitol, like head of the Natural Resources Committee, the Representative Hansen, people like that, Representative or Senator Friends. These are the people that need to know that they can confidently talk to their colleagues at the Capitol and convince them that this is a good way for Minnesota for greater Minnesota to spend their money, and it's as simple as that. This is what we use to get the attention of the legislature, okay? And to say, these cities that signed on, these organizations have signed on to this, and they think that that idea and the program, which is already established and has a good start and is got a lot of interest, and that was another letter that I sent, the $21 million.
Sorry, Mr. Sparlin,
Go
for the
ahead.
sake of time.
Sure.
And Mr. Pershman, or Councilmember Pershman, if you have any other comments or questions, I'll wait, but then I have some ideas too, or just some thoughts I'd like to share.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Pershman. So thank you, Mr. Sparlin,
Yeah.
for coming here.
Absolutely.
And doing the presentation.
Yes.
So I am within our collaboration and council, the one that usually comes up with some, whoa, we didn't expect that question. But also our work sessions are usually a lot more informal.
Sure.
So that we can have that eye contact, kind of that, Mayor Johnson often talks about kitchen table, or, sorry, I'm trying to talk in the mic, which we don't do at the kitchen table. But, so thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
On a personal level, I got involved with council 10 plus years ago, and really because I have a holding pond in my backyard. So definitely I understand just kind of how water flows and the sediment, and also I'm looking at who we have participating, our habitat of turtles. So there's just a lot that goes into it. But what I'm struggling with is, for me personally on the council, and what we declare as our priorities is, there is a strip of land, a riverbank, between this major river and several homes and businesses. And I want that to be where it needs to be for today's world, so that those businesses and homes can get insurance. So I'm more likely to support funding to support that, which we call our levy. But I'm trying to talk like super simple terms, because I feel like I'm not grasping that. And I love that, like, you went right into, like, you know, what the document is and what you're looking for us. But I'm kind of coming from, like, what experience I have, like personal level, but then also what, you know, do we as a council, and what do I personally want to see get moved forward. And I'm honestly, I'll say this on record, I have a higher priority in our levy than the sediment.
This, what we're talking about, treats the source, and what you're talking about is the symptom. And the source is the water coming off the rural landscape. This program is designed to stop, hold, slow down that water that's coming down the entire system to Carver. And that will protect that property you're talking about without raising the levy.
That sounds super logical. I'll have to
Well, it
process
is,
that.
because that's what you're supporting. You're
But I have
supporting
to,
treating the
Mr.
source
Summit,
of
I have
where
to
the water's.
prioritize what would I want our efforts to be in.
I get that, but I'm telling you, if you support this, you won't have to spend that money on that levy. You understand me? If you support putting water on the landscape in the greater basin, you won't have to worry about that river coming up and eating 10 homes off. Yeah.
I'd have to
disagree on
digest that a
Okay,
little and
let
talk
me
to
just-
some engineers.
let
So
me try to-
Thank you for my comments. I'm gonna hand it over to the mayor.
But really, Counselor,
Yes.
I really want you to understand that part of it, because this is where the water is coming from. It's coming from the rural landscape. It's not coming from the river itself. We have 13 tributaries, and they're huge. And Blue Earth River is expanding, and the tile lines are going in left and right, and we're sending more and more water down to you guys.
Scott, I'm going to try to
So,
pull us back
anyway,
a little bit. So
yeah.
I think, I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right, because I think I'm getting a little bit of a better perspective of what we're doing tonight. And I
Sure.
want to really just kind of narrow down and talk about the water storage initiative. So by signing this letter, we are saying that we are effectively supporting your lobbying issues.
That's
to get more
correct.
money for this,
That's
this
correct.
initiative.
Yes.
And you have raised somewhere between 17 and 21 million dollars.
No, 21 million was this last year, 17 million was the legislative session prior to that, and the legislative session that initially we worked on to get the storage program established by the legislature was for 2 million. So it's more like $40 million right now.
That's great. You've got to be
we've
really
done.
proud of
So
that.
and we are proud of that. But this is going to take
Let me ask,
hundreds of millions
because I
of
know,
dollars.
I love your passion for this, but where does that money go? How is that money spent? What does that?
It goes to right now, the program is implemented by the Board of Water and Solar Resources, okay? And so they get the money, and the money from them goes to projects, on the ground projects in the greater Minnesota basin that, that store water. And that's implemented by our soil and water conservation districts, our watershed districts, and cities can apply for grant funding for that through this program as well. Any local unit of government can, if you have a place that you want to try to store some water locally, you can certainly apply for that, and it'll be considered along with all the other applications.
Okay, that is helpful.
Yeah.
Those other questions, Kayla?
No, I understand how Bowser works and how the grant process works. We deal with that a lot with the water management organization. So it makes sense that, if I understand correctly, what you're looking to do is to increase the funding to the program that is being run by Bowser.
That's all I'm asking.
Okay.
That's it, yeah.
Any questions?
So when these programs are implemented, is it going into lands that are government-owned or private ownership? And are you creating new
Yes.
areas, or are you just protecting areas?
Now, that's not my area of expertise.
Sure,
Okay, that's in the program, and you can access all of that information through the Board of Water and Soil Resources website. But to answer your question to the best of my ability, yes, that is going for primarily at the point now, what we would call they have a ranking of proposals that come to them, okay? And they're scored on different aspects of how the water is held back and how long it is, and if it's ecologically more desirable, it scores higher. If it's rate flow reduction is the number one scoring part of how the program works. So, yeah.
Lori, any other questions?
I have one more just
Go ahead.
quick question, if I may.
You may.
Talking about water flow reduction and lessening the need for a levee in Carver, the amount of water that went through the Minnesota River passing Carver in 2024 at its peak was 35,000 cubic feet of water per second. I can't imagine, even if every city had some methodology for water storage, it could have impacted that amount of water flow, prevented that by a sizable amount. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are the numbers around water retention for what you propose?
Okay, first of all, this is not about cities storing water. This isn't like putting a tank from a town and saying, we're gonna hold a bunch of water back. This is the greater landscape, the rural landscape, working lands. Some are government lands, some are other places where lakes and wetlands will be put back, and areas that are vast and that can hold a lot of water, okay?
Okay, I
So
get
we're
it.
not asking cities to hold water. If you had an area you wanted to work on, that you could create some ponds or wetland areas that you want that will ultimately help downstream from you, you could do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the amount of water coming down is exactly what we're talking about. New Ulm where I live in New Ulm, it has the same problem. We have a levee. Mankato has a levee. We've all got that. We all understand how important that is. This is not what that's about. This is about lessening the peak flows in that river when we get extensive rainfalls, which are going to be coming more and more. And we have to recognize that, and we've got to spend some money on it, and a lot of money. Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Eric?
It did. So we're talking about strategy that's decades in the making, which is fine.
That's correct.
But nothing that's is going to impact our community overnight or over a year or, maybe our lifetime.
I hope it.
I get what we're talking about now. That helps me understand the scale of change you're looking for in the funding.
Correct. And also you're in good company. You're joining the family of the river. That's part of this. We're upstream from you guys. And if the upstream people don't do anything, it's not going to help, okay? That's what it's about. So I hope you feel better about signing this, knowing that everyone is looking out for everyone else.
Scott, one last question. Is this Minnesota River specific?
It is Minnesota River and the upper Mississippi.
Okay, So
in
just
Minnesota.
those two
It's just those two
rivers.
stretches, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful. Okay, council, I have no issues with signing on to this now that I have a better idea of what that means and what the initiative is for. Just want to take everybody else's temperature so that we can move on and potentially put it on the consent agenda in 2 weeks.
I grew up in a river town of Mankato. I live in a river town here. Lori, you did bring up a good point that I guess I hadn't really thought, and that's what work sessions are for. But when we're talking about, the state legislature and the state, we only have so much money to go around. And first of all, thank you for coming.
Certainly.
So
No,
this is the
it's
time
my-
where we're gonna
it's
like
my-
start.
it's the-
This
is the passion.
kitchen table conversation.
This is the passion of my life.
Yeah.
I have no problem. I could sit here till midnight and talk to you guys.
Well, we can't.
I have no problem. And I know you guys don't want it, but I can, and it doesn't bother me, so.
So
I'm
when-
so happy to come.
Thank you. So when we are talking about, we're vying for funding at the state for our own levy, which has different issues than just what is happening with, this here and now, what we're talking about on this work session. Historically, we have a number of other issues with that won't come into play. We won't spend all night talking about those. The council knows what those are. But so by signing on to this, are we now putting our eggs in a different basket when we are looking for specific funding for our own levy to be certified? And we've been working really hard at that.
In my opinion, no. And you guys know how strongly I feel about the levy project. In my mind, there are a lot of letters that I sign on to that probably might not be at your line of sight. Things for like the Merriam Junction Trail Bridge. And that actually, potentially, if you're looking at it as competition for bonding bill money, that was in competition. Do you get your funding? Are you getting funding from the bonding bill? Or is this a budget?
There's a request in this year for bonding money.
Okay.
There will be.
I still don't look at it as a competition. This is kind of funding a government agency.
Yeah, wouldn't your levy funding be more from a federal standpoint?
Yes and no. We
Okay.
do have some federal, but we
Sure.
also have our hand out in St. Paul for
Sure.
bonding money.
Yeah.
So, I'm not, if there's plenty of competition for bonding monies, Maple Grove wants a community center, Chask and Chan want Highway 5, we could rattle off a dozen projects in Carver County alone. And I think there will always be that competition, but I don't think, there are dozens of people that have signed on for this. I don't think any one of our legislatures is gonna take a look at that list and go like, oh, Carver's supporting this. We won't give them any bonding money for their levy. Any thoughts?
I understand what's being asked of us here. I'm hesitant to sign on. I don't really have a reason other than just my gut says that it doesn't feel like the right choice for Carver to sign on to, and I wish I had a better explanation of why I feel that way. But it's not, if this is something that the council wants to sign on to, it's not something that I'm going to be fighting against in any way.
It doesn't help.
I know it doesn't. You want me to be
So
decisive.
your vote is to proceed?
If you were to say right now, Kayla, your choice, sign on, not sign on, I would choose not to sign on.
Okay. Eric, thoughts?
Yeah, so now that I think I have a better understanding of what this is, looking at the big picture, I think this is looking at 200 years of development across the state and how that's redirected or interrupted water flows and the effects of that, right? And since we're a river town, how that impacts us. I think what this is a letter of intent that says we recognize that, and over decades, and it will take decades of planning and spending that it's a heightened awareness of what that's done and how that's impacted the river. So I don't have any reservations about signing it either. I think I better understand what the intent is here. And I don't think it's, again, this is a decades and decades long initiative that we're talking about. So that's spent over a long period of time, I think. So I'm okay with it now.
All right, Kristy, what say you?
So thanks for talking through some of that funding that that Lori brought up. I'm glad we discussed a little bit. I've talked in the past about the channelization of our rivers and the velocity. It increases velocity and volume. I've said this at meetings before. So I don't have a problem signing this either. I'm happy to sign on. I wanted to make sure, though, that again, we vetted this a little bit and talked about whether we think we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot, right, if we're looking for other funding. But Courtney brought up some good points. There's lots of things that we sign off on that we could compete with among the other cities who are signing off on things that we're also competing with. So I'm comfortable with signing this.
Okay. Just Scott, for your edification, it looks like I have the votes. This will
Okay.
probably very likely go on the consent agenda for our next meeting, which is
Okay.
March 3rd, I think. It'll be the first Monday night in March, and then we'll get your letter. And
Great.
then probably
Thank you.
on Tuesday the 4th.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks for coming out.
And in the end, if you would put your logo on it, if
Yep.
if it does indeed pass, and
Okay, we can do that.
thank you.
All right, thanks, Scott.
So much. Thank you
Yeah.
for taking the time and your patience with me. So,
Yes, I
Okay.
appreciate you.
thank
Just a
you.
little bit, but we got there. All right. All right, up next is the City of Carver work plan from the Sheriff's Department. I think we can take a stab at going through that. Let me just pull it up here.
It really wasn't much.
Yeah, this is just the contract and kind of the work plan and the areas that our deputies take a look at. I know that as I was going through here, I would put notes and be like, oh, what about snowstorm parking? And I scroll down
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, there it is. So I don't know that I had a ton of stuff. I can start going through my notes if you guys would like, but I'm completely tap dancing so that I can get to the right page here.
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so I think what we'll just do is we'll just kind of go through the contract and share our thoughts and share our questions, and probably know that Brent will be watching this later on this week or next week.
Yeah.
I can follow up. So my first question, we'll just go through this page by page. I'm on page 1. For the let's see, this is a change that has been made recently, but under contract administration, the last bullet says prepare and share a weekly email update. My question for that, or my request, which I think has already been incorporated, is that we either share all addresses on that or none. Because I think some would say, oh, it was at Quick Trip, and then the other one would be like a business in Carver or whatever. So let's either be vague consistently, or and I think sometimes the sheriff's department would do like the 400 block of High Street or whatever, or an address on High Street. Let's just either all or nothing for that.
I don't mind knowing where if there's trending of activity, whatever it may be, in the city. I don't know that, the weekly updates come to us, but everything is public knowledge once it's put out. So I don't know that I need a specific address, but I do, you feel differently when it comes to businesses, right? Like, because Quick Trip isn't someone's home.
Yeah.
Right? To say, oh, this happened at Quick Trip or Fleet Farm
Yeah.
or whatever, feels a lot different than saying it happened at 123 Street A. So I like the idea of having like the block of like in the 400, but I don't know how specific we want to get in here. I do like to know whether it's Quick Trip or Fleet Farm or something like that, but we will see some for whether it's, I don't know.
Passing fraudulent checks at a local business, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but I would also like to know if we're seeing a crime spree in a certain area. I think that we need to know that.
I think the issue has been remedied because I think they already have started using the vague, off of High Street, or whatever that might be. So I think I just wanted to kind of go on the record with that.
So what are we putting forward then? We do want some type of indicator of where it is?
Yeah, and
But
that's what
without
they,
a specific.
that's a change that's been made.
Yeah,
so-
I'm just saying that's where
Yes.
we're gonna go
Yeah.
forward, okay.
Yeah, that's mine.
I agree with that. I think it's important to at least have a general idea of where things are happening so that we have, if we have trends that are appearing, we can identify them. But I don't think it's necessary to know the exact location.
All right, any other comments or thoughts on page 1 of the contract, or the work plan?
No,
Not for me.
I think Mr. Councilmember Pershman has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
I don't know that I had my hand raised. I think I have a general question, though.
You actually,
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna
gonna
have a
do.
little
It's
hand.
you.
It's raised on
Or
raised on
somebody's-
your,
or
right over your
somebody's-
mouth right now.
Somebody's giving you a high five.
How do I unraise my hand?
It's gone.
It's gone now.
It'll
Don't
time
touch
out.
anything.
Yeah, it'll time out.
Sorry. So as I'm looking through, all of this, what I don't see, and I don't know how we address this, is the issue of retention within the sheriff's department, because so many of these initiatives really depend on having somebody longer than 6 months or longer than a year. And it seems like that's something we haven't had in a long time. Is anything related to retention, can that be part of this draft?
I love where you're going with that. I think that is the drawback of this relationship, right? Like, we can't give retention bonuses.
You can't do community building when you're changing out
Right.
every few months.
Yep.
We had that for a while. I think that was Larry Lassard. I think that's the name that I remember for the longest duration. And I do because he was in place for such a long time.
Yep.
Do I have the right name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Deputy
Yeah,
Senator.
And Gowan.
so
Yeah, correct.
retention is really important for us because all of these other programs around community engagement and involvement, they're great initiatives, but they don't stick
Right.
without people that stick. And I don't know what the sheriff's department can do to incorporate that in their plan. But that's just an observation.
No, I noted. I think that's great. If anybody can figure out a way to work that into this plan, it's Brent Mareck, and I'm sure he'll. But yeah, same frustrations when the 5 of us are like, "What's the deputy's name?"
Yeah. No, that's real.
It's a
Yeah.
bummer. And I think by the nature of this contract, it's meant to be kind of a 2-year service tenure, and before they rotate off. But I don't know that we've had anybody complete that 2 years in a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe
Eric,
since-
oh, sorry.
Maybe, yeah.
I was gonna say, Eric, I completely agree with you, but when we're working on, their work plan, this isn't a retention plan or a hiring plan. I don't know that this is gonna be able to address that as much as we would like to lock them in for a contract of time and say you can't go.
Okay, on page 2, and this is just another emphasis thing, but under patrol activity and hours of work, the second bullet says contract deputies will advise city staff. Oh, that's not what I thought it meant. Never mind. Does
know, I was
anybody
like,
else
I
have
don't see-
anything on page 2?
No.
Okay, moving on to page 3. I do not have anything on page 3. Page 4. I just had in my notes, the third bullet mentions about working with loss prevention staff at Fleet Farm. I just had more questions, and maybe this is something that we'd have to go over again. But like, why is Fleet Farm? I know that they're big into loss prevention. I always am terrified that I'm going to accidentally put something in my pockets when I'm there and get busted, because I know that they're just really, really good at that.
Yeah.
I'm like seed packets or something like
Right.
But my question is why is Fleet Farm being called out here? I think I would love to see them work closely with whoever needs the help.
Yeah.
If there's an
Yeah.
issue with shoplifting at Carver Bait and Tackle, if there's an issue, with the
Is that
bars.
simply based on the number of responses to Fleet Farm?
Probably, I would guess.
I think too,
Whatever.
anecdotally, I think Fleet Farm as a corporation prosecutes every shoplift. I think there's some other national major retailers that are like, whoa, and they have their reasons,
Yeah.
for just not pursuing that. So I don't know that there's, anything different that can be done. Like, that's just,
I think now though, like we have Quick Trip, and we had a report of, there's stuff that happens at Casey's or at Quick Trip, and as we get other businesses in town, it may be, I want this. I want them to work with management and loss prevention
Yes.
staff. Maybe we just don't call it Mills Fleet Farm because it's been the biggest one that we've had.
Right.
Maybe it just says continue to work with. We just take the first sentence out.
Yeah.
yes.
Because
I agree with that.
Because
Yeah.
maybe that is like a, conversation to have with some of the other retailers, how-
I also wonder if the fact that we call out loss prevention staff might be why Fleet Farm specifically is listed, because I don't know that there is a specific loss prevention staff at any of the other businesses. It's just
Right.
who's ever
That's-
on duty.
Yeah.
Right.
For now.
Yeah.
For now,
Right.
yeah.
I would be happy to if we would take that first line out and just start with continue working with both management and loss prevention staff.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yep.
Anything else on page 4? And then page 5 is the end, and I didn't have anything else. Okay.
I don't have anything. No, I don't have anything else. I thought
Okay.
it looked pretty good.
Eric, anything from you?
Nothing else for me.
Okay. Kayla?
I do have a question about the winter parking enforcement. So,
What page of the?
so this is page 4. It just says that they should be enforcing winter parking, and I know that there are a number, at least this year, there are a number of vehicles that have not moved for multiple snow events. So are we having troubles with the staffing? Is that something that we need to highlight more?
I think that's always been something that is done, isn't done proactively, is my
Okay.
understanding. I don't know that, and I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit when we talked about our limiting of on-street parking, is that this is just completely speculative, but I don't know that the deputies have the bandwidth to be searching for cars that are parked in a snow emergency
Yeah.
area when there are cars careening off the ditch at high speed left
Yeah.
and right on 212. So I think that that's the issue. But I
Okay.
think truly this is turning into something where, like, you have to call that in. There's a
Yeah.
car on my street too that still has, the tracks around it.
I've seen a couple of,
Like,
I've seen a couple of cars that have multiple
Yeah.
plow tracks
Yeah.
around them.
I think it's gonna be a little bit of a sea change, but I think we need our residents to get used to calling that kind of stuff in.
Okay.
I also think though, I believe there's, I don't want to say if there's the enforcement, pumped up enforcement for it. So I think,
Yeah.
a couple times a winter, we haven't had a ton of snow this winter, so it hasn't, but we
Yeah.
all know the first snowfall that they get hit kind of hard with out there with the snow policy and parking. And so I'm not sure if it comes from city manager, if it comes from the, Carver County Sheriff's Office, where they say, okay, we're gonna highlight this, when they do their
Yeah.
different things for highlighting seatbelts or highlighting this, that maybe it comes from that some of the time over the year too. So I agree that, we have seen some after this last snowfall. I've seen some too that haven't moved and haven't been ticketed. But again, with staff, are they out helping accidents at the
Yeah,
same time?
that's
So there's a
kind of what I was
priority.
asking, yeah.
So I don't mind once in a while, a few times a year saying, okay, let's have the, let's specifically tell the sheriff's office, like, this snowstorm's coming, as time allows and calls allow, if you have time to come through Carver and take a look for, parked cars, but.
Yeah. That was just my question, was that I just wanted to know if this has been our policy, kind of, if it's a staff problem, if it's a priority problem, if it's, those sorts of things. So, thank you for that information.
Probably all the above.
Yeah, I guess too.
I feel like everything in city government is all of the above.
All right, Eric, did we go through?
I didn't have anything to add.
Okay, sorry, Lori.
Eric, anything from you additional?
Nothing else from me.
Okay. All right, let's see, then I think we have moved through this a few minutes early, which we haven't done in a long time. I would entertain a motion to adjourn from the work session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Also, motion by Councilmember Pershman.
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Pasco. Vicky, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Pasco.
Aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye.
Councilmember Pershman.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Oh, All right, motion passes, we are adjourned.